So, hello everybody. Great to have you on our webinar. Great to have you all here on time as well. My name's John Johnson from NSF. I'm an Executive Director based in the UK, and I wanted to extend a warm welcome to all of our participants this afternoon from the UK, from Europe, from USA, India, Australia, South Korea, Canada, Malta, Czech Republic, Russia and Switzerland. And we're going to spend about 30 minutes together today to talk through some of the key messages, the do's and don'ts of GMP remediation. As you can see, I work for one of the leading GMP consultancies who work in the fields of specialist training, auditing and consultancy, specifically working in transformational projects that move companies from difficulty into a long-term sustainable growth. Underpinning companies with remediation projects, education programs, and trying to shape the right type of culture that will deliver long-term sustainable success and growth within this business. As you can see, I've had some experience over the last 30-odd years of working with a number of pharmaceutical companies, both large and small, contract manufacturing organizations as much as innovator companies. And my experience as a quality director and vice president and also as a qualified person has meant that I've had some significant experience in managing GMP inspections from the regulators, particularly US FDA and also UK MHRA. So what we're going to talk about over the next half an hour or so is shown on the next slide. We're going to really unpack the reasons why a GMP remediation program may actually be needed. We're going to talk about the key objectives of a remediation program, and we're going to unpack the 5 attributes that your program must have if it's going to be sustainable and also achieve the key expectations of your executive management team and also the expectations of your regulators. We're also going to talk through the typical life cycle of a remediation program and unpack how you can get through to acceptance, action and evaluation as quickly as possible, making sure that whatever you do is both proportionate and timely and is sustainable for the long term. And then we're going to go through some stories that lead us to the top 10 must-dos in your remediation program. So when you think about the reasons why a remediation program is needed, there's actually 3 main reasons. And the first one is that actually you identified the risk yourself. So congratulations with that. It means that you've actually identified the risks ahead of other people finding it for you. And that's obviously the best place to be, because it means that your organization has not experienced a nasty surprise or an unbudgeted project. It means that your systems have actually found this area for improvement itself. Of course, alternatively, you may find that somebody else has identified that risk for you, in so much as a corporate quality team or a client GMP inspection or a regulatory inspection has identified an area of risk that you weren't aware of. And that can obviously be a tough situation to manage because it's often unbudgeted. It can be a nasty surprise, and it may be an unforeseen risk that you've not been able to work on previously. But I guess being positive as well, at least you now know that there's an area that you need to focus on. And of course, the third reason for GMP remediation programs is maybe that you identified the risk, you were working on the CAPA, but for a variety of reasons that CAPA hadn't been completed on time, and somebody has identified this gap and identified that you've got work in progress, or maybe even that work that's in progress has gone late against its target completion date. So, fantastic if you've actually identified it yourself. It means that your systems for quality planning, of maintaining compliance to ICH Q9 quality risk management, it means that your GMP risk register has identified this issue in advance. It also could be showing you that your internal audit program is working well, and that your surveillance processes, both at the shop floor and during auditing, are finding issues ahead of them becoming crises, and that's got to be a good thing. But if somebody else has identified that risk for you, of course, you ought to be asking yourself why. Why, and why? What led to you missing this risk? What led to you not identifying this risk in advance? What piece of knowledge or insight or expertise or experience was deficient that led to you not seeing this rock in the road or issue that needs to be fixed? And then, of course, the third possibility for needing the GMP remediation program is that, in fact, your program had not been completed according to its target completion dates. So you may ask yourself, what resource management issues led to this? Had the company evaluated the risk accurately and had assigned the correct resources and expertise to it? Or indeed, was it just a question of timing that the audit team came during work in progress, where you're already working on the remediation plan, but it hadn't yet come to its natural endpoint? So obviously, it makes an awful lot of sense if you're actually identifying your own risks in advance, planning out your own remediation programs, rather than relying on somebody else to find them for you, particularly when that someone else may be a regulatory inspector. So when you think of your remediation program, what are you actually trying to achieve? The first thing you really want to achieve is to link your remediation program to that basic requirement of business continuity. We often talk about quality management systems being what keeps a company in perpetual GMP inspection readiness. But in fact, they're far, far more important than that. Quality management systems are also business management systems. And if you're not running a quality management system and you're continually in firefighting mode, in continual remediation programs, you are risking business continuity. You're risking regulatory action, recalls, poor perception by clients and regulators, and all of that leads to a lack of confidence in planning for the future. So maintaining a way of operating a quality management system actually supports business continuity. And being clear that a successful remediation program allows for confident planning in the future is really important. The second objective is to make sure that the expectations of your business are met in the long term. So those expectations around maintaining a high standard and expertise in quality, a high standard and expertise in GMP compliance, absolutely crucial. Of course, you also want your company to be cost effective and to be able to deliver product to the market, to the target completion dates, and maintain a level of customer service. And you want to be sure that your remediation program takes into account all three of these parameters, ensuring continuation of supply at the right cost and to the right quality and GMP status. Looking further into your remediation program, of course, you want to be sure that your program will make provision to avoid or minimize risk that could lead to product misbranding, adulteration, or systemic or repeat GMP non-conformances. So being sure that each of your programs, your action plans, avoid product misbranding, product adulteration, or systemic non-conformances is absolutely critical. In the cases where your corrective actions, preventive actions are shared with regulators, you need to be able to respond to those regulators in a way that is credible, trustworthy, comprehensive, and that you keep to those commitments. Regulators expect you to maintain those commitments, to hit the target completion dates, and to provide a full panorama, a comprehensive corrective and preventive action plan. So responding in full to the regulators is, of course, really important. Once the program begins, you want to be sure that everything stays on mission, there's no risk of recurring issues, no surprises, things are kept to budget, and whatever you put in place is sustainable, logical, well documented, and is proportionate to the risk that you're trying to prevent. So if you look at those 5 key objectives, maintain those and think about those when you're putting together your CAPA and your program of corrections and SOP updates and training, then that will obviously lead to a much better long-term outcome. We've done a lot of research over our remediation programs that we've run with companies, and we understand that there are really 5 attributes that a remediation program must have. Collaboration, commitment, and communication are absolutely critical. But you won't get effective collaboration, commitment, and communication unless you can underpin that with a culture of quality. And what we mean by a culture of quality is this obsessive curiosity to find simpler and more predictable ways of doing things right, doing things the right way, and being able to really drill down to what is important and what is going to give you the right long-term sustainable outcome. But making sure you've got that culture in place will always lead to better team working and collaboration, better commitment from people throughout your organization, and a simple communication program that keeps people on mission over the long term. Of course, these are not one-off interventions and interactions. These programs can sometimes take, on average, in terms of a warning letter or an MHRA inspection action group referral, on average these programs can take between 12 to 24 months. And in order to maintain that momentum and the enthusiasm for completing these actions, you need to think hard about how you're going to maintain continuity, how you're going to maintain momentum and motivation in completing those actions on time. Needless to say, every action that you put in place needs to be linked very closely to the GMP regulations, the directives, the CGMP expectations that the observation or issue was connected to. So there really is no substitute for expertise in compliance and project management, and no substitute at all for that expertise. This is why we find that even though we run a number of remediation programs that are steeped in improving GMP compliance, we know that those GMP compliance improvements can't be maintained unless expertise within the organization is enhanced. So in most cases, there is a high degree of expertise added to both education programs and also leadership programs, so that in making sure that you prevent recurrence, you know that your staff know not just the know-how, but also the know-why. So education programs really go hand in hand with remediation programs. And of course, all of this is very easy to talk about, but it's difficult to do unless you have the right culture, the right management behaviors, underpinned by expertise and experience in this key area. On my next slide, I wanted to show really how it feels sometimes being a project manager in a remediation program. So put yourself in the place of the sheep farmer in this photograph. You are the project manager and sheep farmer. You have a defined vision or purpose on what you want to achieve in your program. And you're trying to make sure that your people and all of the associated non-conformances work together to move in the same direction, in the direction that you want them to. And as you can see from this picture, without effective tools and without effective indicators, signals, management review processes, the farmer would never be able to control those sheep. But if he was just relying on the tools and the indicators, in this case the rope and the staff or stick, he still wouldn't be able to control multiple projects with multidisciplinary teams, with a number of actionees. What's absolutely crucial in a remediation program is that you have a number of committed, action-orientated subject matter experts, the sheepdogs, who can work with you. They know the vision and purpose, they know what the signals mean, and they can make sure that the sheep and the non-conformances are all working together in the same direction, committed to the same outcome. So making sure you know who you can rely on, who are going to be your key actionees, and what tools and indicators you're going to use, and your communication styles is absolutely critical in a remediation program. So let's look at the typical life cycle. And in fact, like life itself, the life cycle doesn't just go round in one direction. There can be some swinging between the different steps in this life cycle. So let's start really with discovery. So let's assume that you now know that there are certain things in your organization that need to be improved. Sometimes those discoveries can be very uncomfortable. They can be nasty surprises, or they could be something that you were aware of but hadn't quite got around to fixing. And when you get to that moment of discovery and you share that discovery with your colleagues, sometimes you can see around the room and within your team a feeling of disbelief, a feeling of denial, even some anger being displayed amongst your team. And that's quite natural. And sometimes people will try to defend things that they really shouldn't even try to defend. You know, trying to defend the indefendable only leads to stasis and inactivity. So there's often a period in this whole process where you have to get beyond the denial into acceptance as quickly as possible. But often we find in this life cycle that there is a period where actually there is stasis, that once disbelief and denial has been completed and people have moved on, they feel becalmed. They're not sure which direction to go in. They're like a yacht on a calm sea with no particular direction to go into. And that becalmed period can sometimes lead to real frustration or panic and lead back to anger. So you really want your team to be able to move into acceptance as quickly as possible so that you can then start evaluating options, looking at proportionate kappa, acknowledging the brutal reality of where you are, and to move quickly into planning and then into execution of actions. So without skipping any of those steps, the brilliant project manager in the field of remediation programs wants to move into acceptance, evaluation, planning and action as soon as possible. But it's very important to communicate, to allow some time to evaluate the options and start to engage people in doing the right thing at the right time in a highly planned way. So of course we all want to move into actions as quickly as possible, and making sure you take action on time, in full, well documented is going to be crucial in the final outcome. But what many firms actually forget is this key step of doing an effectiveness check. So how do you know that your commitment is actually going to stick? How do you know the commitment has been effective? How do you know that commitment is going to prevent a reoccurrence? And making sure that you've defined in advance how you're going to measure what success looks like is often very, very important, because it will actually avoid you defining CAPA, which is going to be costly, ineffective, and deliver something you may not want, may not value, or actually may not deliver you anything at all. So having the real discipline in defining effectiveness checks up front can really make sure that you spend your dollars and your time and your people's energies in the right areas for the right reasons. Of course, many companies will have some form of remediation program that is linked to their training and education program. We do something very similar at NSF, where we can utilize this simple cycle of quality planning, appraisal, audit preparation, CAPA, so that ultimately you get to a place of perpetual inspection readiness. And we link in our programs as well a section in this life cycle that allows time for proper simplification and review of business effectiveness, because we are passionate about making sure that every process in the pharmaceutical quality system is as simple as possible, because we know that simple is always going to lead to better compliance. So we utilize those education programs across both science, compliance, and leadership areas to make sure that you don't just solve the technical issue, you don't just solve the compliance issue, you also solve the issue that led to that initial problem, which often is related to people's behaviors, leadership styles, communication styles, and the way people engage with error and deviations. So moving on, what are these 5 root causes that make a remediation program necessary? Well, first and foremost, it normally comes from a lack of foresight on how the future might affect your business. So the future is out there, everybody. It's changing rapidly, and it's unpredictable. But you need to really spend some time planning for that future and trying to shape a future that's going to minimize unpredictability, variation, and regulatory action. So making sure you've got adequate foresight is crucial to avoid the need for a remediation program. You, of course, also need to be sure that you've got sufficient resources and knowledge within your management team that will prevent a remediation being necessary, and investing in your people, investing in their education and coaching, avoiding staff turnover, and making sure your subject matter experts are truly expert in their areas is absolutely crucial in reducing the cost and need for remediation programs. Of course, the other thing that is often cited as a reason for a remediation program is actually that the company itself failed to identify the risk in the first place, or maybe evaluated the risk wrongly, or didn't take the action to mitigate or minimize the risk occurring. And these non-compliances are often related to a failure to follow the requirements of ICHQ 9, particularly in quality planning, in management review, auditing, and making sure that there's a system for long-term preparedness in regulatory inspections. Of course, at the core of all of this is to make sure that you have a proper, highly developed visual quality management system that is properly aligned to the needs of your business, aligned to ICHQ 10, and is really closely connected to your processes of identifying root causes. Because if root causes are not properly identified, it will always lead to wasted time, ineffective CAPA, and that horrible Groundhog Day when you get recurring issues. And time again, we see that many quality management systems are just overly complex for what they're there to achieve. So making sure you have simplification in your program, visual management in your program, should minimize the overcomplexity within the QMS. So once you've embarked on your remediation program, what are your top 10 must-dos? Well, the first one, of course, is do whatever you can to actually prevent the need for a reactive remediation program. Be proactive in what you're doing, because our research shows that preventive actions are in fact 11 times cheaper than doing remediation. You've also got to be prepared for the long haul. I've said before that these programs can often take between 12 and 24 months. They can be incredibly expensive and a distraction to your business. So being aware of what needs to be done from a preventive point of view is really important from a cost perspective, and also to avoid distractions to your business in the long term. Of course, there's no substitute for technical knowledge of the CGMPs, being aware of how the GMP regulations and expectations are changing. You should also be very clear on what needs to be done is sustainable and is going to be effective in the long term, and is actually scalable for your business as your business grows. And being clear about that with your staff actually helps them come along with you, because if they know that they're spending their time on something that's worthwhile, that's sustainable, that's clear and logical, you'll bring them with you. And bringing your staff with you is crucial. And in doing that, you actually help them grow and understand the know why as much as the know how. Of course, simplification is going to strengthen your quality management system, and being able to take a step back and look at the panorama of your quality system and confirm that it is simple and right-sized for your business is absolutely important too. Needless to say, your commitments that you make to yourself, to the regulators and to your clients need to be specific, easily measured, action-orientated and realistic. And you have to keep to those commitments. The only reason why you shouldn't keep to a commitment is because you've actually identified, with the benefit of hindsight, better ways of doing it. So if you can find better, more expansive, more preventive ways of remediating, that's fine, but you have to keep to your original commitment. Of course, in the future, whoever has been involved in a remediation program knows that you need to prove that those actions have been completed, and keeping meticulous records of these actions so that you can see exactly how it was done, when it was done, and to what effect is important for you in the long term. So be clear on what you've done and how it's demonstrably meeting the CGMPs. And of course, the final thing, and there's no substitute for this in a remediation program, you need to have some great project management skills. Management skills of planning, of execution, and then recognizing when things are going well. And when things go well, it's great to be able to give positive, immediate consequences, recognition, thanks, making sure that people are rewarded in some way for meeting those commitments. And equally, of course, when things go wrong, when things go late, or things were not done to the right standard, there has to be some recognition of those situations as well, so that we can get that program back on track. So when we've looked at the high-performing companies who do remediation programs, we've identified these 5 areas as areas of excellence. So making sure teams are developed, that there's a degree of organizational development and education, that there is proper risk management to ICHQ 9, that the company has a culture for completing actions on time with effective project management, a way of simplifying and making lean any commitments and programs, and of course maintaining technical expertise is critical in running any business to a long-term sustainable standard. So my message to you really is don't let that hand sleep. Look at those 5 areas. Find out for yourself where you're excellent in those 5 areas and where you can improve. Evaluate those areas. and look to see how you can enhance the capability across your team across those 5 areas, and formulate a plan, take action and be proactive. And ultimately, when you've taken those actions, verify that those actions have really given you what you set out to achieve. And of course, I would certainly say keep in touch with us. There's the web link to our remediation program information. And I've also put together a nice 6-minute YouTube clip on remediation case studies that we've worked on over the last year or two. And they give you some further details on how to make your remediation program successful. So our webinars are generally about 30 minutes. They're fairly short and sharp. I'll be recording these, and I'll be able to circulate these to you after the webinar. And I'll have this webinar available to you as well on YouTube. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask me, then please contact me on my email address, and I'll get back to you and allow some access into the expertise we have in our organisation. So, thank you so much for listening. I hope you found this valuable, and I hope it's given you an insight into how you can make your remediation programs ideally more proactive, but certainly more effective. Thank you very much. This is John Johnson from NSF, and I hope that was useful to you. Thank you very much.